left, so that's within that small fraction of forest that remains. So we're in a very unique area today that we get to hike in, and it should be a fantastic.
So what are the figures for the island again? All growth on the Vancouver Island altogether, how much is left?
75% of the productive old growth forests have been logged, including 90% of the valley bottoms.
90%.
Yeah, south of Barkley Sound, it's about 4% of the valley bottoms that remain. So,
South of Barkley Sound.
yeah, Port Alberni-ish sort of.
What part of that 4% is safe?
Oh, that's probably most of it now exists within the Carmanah-Walbrand Provincial Park and in the Nidinat Triangle. So, but I mean, remember, we're talking about, of that 4%, maybe about 3% protected. There used to be another 96% though. So, but the last little 1% valley bottom remnants, it's basically here. There's also the Christy Clark Grove further up, and there's some old growth valley bottom there. Also some of the upper Walbrand. But we'll talk more as we go in. We're going to head down here and left, and give a bit of space for the person behind you going down. You got to hang on to the rope, but don't get too close to them. Give them a bit of space. So the only steep stretch is really here.
Somewhere. Careful with your footing on the rocks here.
I brought it.
It's so steep going back there.
And I'll stay here and help you. Good. The hand when they need it. This is the most challenging part. So if you make this, you're all good. This is a good boardwalk example. Good. Okay. A little wobbly.
Yes.
Yeah, or a water slide, or any other.
What? Oh, you know the most unique part about the system? The canopy. That's true. Forgot the rest of it. It's getting up to 3 though, it counts. All the suspended.
Yes, there's a few big Douglas fir veterans, scattered.
Right, yeah, you take it back there, I guess, onto the walk. In a rocky area. I guess they tend to just shatter too when they fall them.
Give you a quick overview about some of the facts about Avatar Grove. Actually, TJ would be best to talk about that. Some of the key facts about Avatar Grove, some of the history here, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of biodiversity from our experts.
So, here we are. We've made it the first 50 feet. And everyone's still alive. This is, we're right beside one of the biggest Douglas, actually the biggest Douglas fir tree in the Avatar Grove. Absolutely massive tree. And this area was discovered by myself and a friend in late 2009 on a trip through the Gordon River Valley. If you were to continue along this road, you actually end up near Lake Cowichan. And we were coming through the valley to see how much old growth was left. Unfortunately, it's mostly big stumps up there, and that's why we have a campaign to protect what's left. Upon arriving here, though, we noticed as we were pointing out the road, the big spiky tops of the cedar trees. and came on in and started noticing, yeah, giant, massive trees, and not only big trees, but ones of really strange alien shape, as you'll see in the red cedars that are a little further down the pathway. A couple months later, in early 2010, Ken and myself came back to explore the area a bit more, and in that amount of time, just those 2 months, it had been flagged for logging. There was falling boundary tape running through here and road location ribbon, which was just a really crazy piece of timing. Like we'd just formed the organization, we'd just found this place, and after however long this logging road's been here, probably 40, 50 years, it was set for logging. So we had a campaign on our hands right away to protect this. The movie Avatar had come out right around then, which is about protecting old growth on an alien planet, and so Ken thought it was quite a fitting name that if you wanted to see these fantastic forests right here on Earth, you could come and visit this place.
Actually, it was James Cameron who was inspired by our campaign to call it.
And the really the last piece of irony here, or just a very interesting piece of circumstance, is just the next mountain over from here is called Pandora's Peak, and we didn't plan that. So maybe there's some synchronicity coming together. Anyway, we started bringing, we brought the media here, which started the first news articles around the Grove and its incredible trees. We started leading tons of hikes. We were bringing people out nearly once a month and leading, guiding on other people's hikes, and then people started coming on their own. The government's position at the start was that there was no need to protect this area. 25% of what is about a 59 hectare, 60 hectare area was within what's called an old growth management area. That legally puts those places off limits to logging. However, that only covered sort of the edge of the creeks and really left out all the biggest, best trees where everyone hikes. So there was a big need to push hard to see this area protected. We started bringing local politicians to the area. NDP MLA John Horgan came, the former Liberal MP Keith Martin, the CRD Director Mike Hicks. We started getting business leaders, leader of Chamber of Commerce from town to come here. And all of them were saying it just makes sense to protect this place. This is Port Renfrew's Cathedral Grove, really. And if you were to log it, you would have a short-term supply of a few jobs, not even to many locals. There's not too many people in town, maybe 2 to 3 people who are working within the forest industry right now in Port Renfrew. Whereas if you protect it, you have long-term sustainable jobs through ecotourism for this town. As you can see, there's a lot of people here today. From that, it was a 2-year quest. Again, tons of hikes, incessant media articles, including international news coverage from Al Jazeera. And during the I think it was the Libyan uprising, and there was like news on Gaddafi and stuff. We had Al Jazeera fly out from Toronto on their own behalf. They contacted us to do a tour of the Avatar Grove and cover the war in BC's woods. So, yeah, international spotlight. We had emails from Thailand of people saying like, wow, we want to come see your big trees. This is incredible.
Can you imagine Gaddafi looking at the screen? It's like, wow, that is one gnarly tree.
Yeah. Yeah, and it really snowballed from there. And then there became the point where people could write in for public commentary period if they wanted to see the grove protected. Out of 250 letters that were received, I think there was 248 that were in favor. I don't know who the 2 disgruntled people were. Yeah, you. And then just this past February, it was declared off limits to logging through an old growth management area. So that's the our first victory, and we're 1 for 1, so we're at 100% right now.
You feeling smug?
Yeah, we'll pack it in right now. It's really in large part due to everyone's involvement with this, and it really is without public participation, we don't really get anywhere. So it's thanks to all of you guys as well for backing this, and we're here today to enjoy the forest, and it stands because of you. So that's kind of the quick summary of the Grove. And
the key thing to remember too is this has always been a campaign about a provincial old growth strategy. So Avatar Grove here was largely the catalyst or the springboard to make it concrete and real. So it's not just emails about why we need a provincial old growth strategy. People could see a place, an endangered, unprotected place on Crown lands here firsthand. So, but the big goal has never been just individual stands, right? The goal here is to get a comprehensive strategy so we can protect the last, there's about 600,000 hectares of productive old growth forests on Vancouver Island, probably a similar amount in the southwestern mainland, You have other areas within the BC interior. We're pushing primarily for a provincial plan that'll save the old growth, ensure sustainable logging of second growth forests, as well as recruitment of second growth into old growth, and an end to raw log exports so that we can keep the jobs here. So remember, there's something bigger at work. Even though we've got this area now off limits to logging, there's the other several million hectares left. And with that, we'll talk more about the actual boardwalk stuff later. But I just want to introduce Victoria's finest naturalists who are here with us today. So we've got Darren Copley, the president of the Victoria Natural History Society. Dr. Neville Winchester, who's like the early expert out here on all the canopy species and teaches invertebrate biology.
It doesn't mean he's young, by the way.
And we have Claudia. Where's Claudia?
Hiding.
Yeah, I see it.
So Claudia's, everyone will know her as the Welcome to Victoria Natural History Society. She's also the BC Royal Museum, the Seniors Collection Manager for Entomology. And we also have Kevin Jordan here, who's climbed more trees than anybody in Canada and has done more canopy research around the world, pretty much, than anybody around the world. So they all have things to contribute. So if you want to lead off, this is not like a regular hike, by the way. It's going to be going slower as we come across different things.
So could you guys have guessed which one was the climber? You thought it was me, right?
Never climb with a beard, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. It's very dangerous. We're going to see TJ's hair. It's actually up on top of one of the trees here. It better be there, man, if you don't know his old hair.
He had old growth that he clear cut.
He did have clear cut. So most of us, or the four of us, really look at invertebrates now. So insects and spiders and things like that. And that's what a place like this is all about. But it's often when we're talking about saving a old growth forest, we usually talk about the bigger things. I can hear, how many species of birds do we hear singing right now?
2 or 3.
So Wilson's warbler,
Winter wren.
the Pacific wren. Yeah, it used to be called winter wren, now Pacific wren.
And Pacific slope flycatcher.
And a flycatcher. So some of these birds, like that, the warbler, comes here in the springtime from the south. So it's worth its while to fly up into our forest to breed because there's enough insect life for it. So it gets back to insects again. But we just want to give you an idea here. What's the difference between this part of Vancouver Island? How many of you are from the eastern side of Vancouver Island? The dry side? Yeah. So we get how much rain there annually?
2 feet? A lot.
2 to 3 feet a year. If you think Victoria's gets a lot, you should probably start leaving this place right now. So the west coast of Vancouver Island right here gets up to 10 feet a year. So that's one of the big differences. The east side of Vancouver Island is a ecosystem different than most of the rest of Vancouver Island. So that's the coastal Douglas fir ecosystem. So it's a dry, drought-tolerant ecosystem. This tree really is the dominant tree in that ecosystem, the Douglas fir. Out here, it's a whole other suite of trees, Sitka spruce, hemlock, cedar, that like the wet and can tolerate the wet. So this is the coastal western hemlock biogeoclimatic zone. 10 feet of water a year. It's amazing. And we're gonna, as we walk along, if there's some things you want to see, or you want to know more about, want us to make up a name for, ask any one of us. Usually it'll be the right name, not always.
And we can age it too.
And we can, yeah. A lot of the things that we study, we still don't know the spiders that live in a forest like this, all of them. We're still finding new species new to science. When Neville did their study, they found how many species new to science up in the
300. Reported 300 or so.
And that was just where you had taxonomic expertise.
Yeah.
Right,
The
so there
point
was somebody
is,
who
in
could
this-
tell they were new.
In the start of the Carmana, that's what's unique about these areas. There's not all that many of them left. And so if you're in the biodiversity debate, which everybody is, it's just counting, are there species there and nowhere else? That's a big part of the debate. And I would say in these remnant stands, which I was glad to hear, Ken, that you're linking them together, I think is most important. But you would have several species that are here and found nowhere else. And so you're left with, is it worth saving those species by essentially protecting the bigger sort of trees in area? And that's really where it's at. I mean, if you were to count the number of species altogether in an ancient forest, it's nowhere near as much as it is in other areas. The point is there are several species that are unique only to that forest. And I would say the same for Avatar Grove. There are several species unknown and hence unrecorded that are new to science. for sure. A lot of those obviously are going to be invertebrates, as you said, insects and spiders and things, but there's a whole bunch of things that happen with the bigger vertebrates, such as the salamanders and some of the birds, that we don't even know the simple biology about what's going on there. So I think that these are sort of storehouses of places that we can observe and catalog species, and hopefully they'll be around for several years to come.
And Ken and TJ, you probably get from people who aren't necessarily as supportive as you'd like, you probably get fairly frequently, but trees grow back, right? So if you cut it, they'll grow back. But the characteristics that are associated with a tree like this, we won't recover because we don't maintain a forest for hundreds and hundreds of years before we cut it again. So it never gets those features that Neville's talking about, that suspended canopy soils that are in the moss layers that you see on the branches. Those take hundreds of years to generate, and if the trees are on a logging rotation of, what is it, 55 to 80 years, they're just stick trees. They have no features that are important for the unique fauna.
Yeah, and what Claudia says is important, and it's sort of, not to throw a word out there, but structural integrity is a big one, and it takes, we figured it takes at least well over 300 years to get that structural integrity. So for instance, if you're over in the Carmanah, marble murrelets, these little flying footballs, which nest in the top of these trees, they don't nest in second growth trees that are 100 years of age, because the structural complexity is not there. So that's what first started Kevin and myself back in the 90s. We get to the tops of these trees, and the thick rich moss mats are up to 30 to 40 centimeters deep, and they're on great big branches and crevices and cracks and everything else. The habitat is not replicated in second growth forests. So that we had that argument. It's amazing that it still comes on. I thought we beat it into the ground.
No, it's still
but
there.
It's still there. And it's probably from
forests are a renewable resource.
It's from old growth foresters that have lots of lichens on them. I think that's where that comes from. So the structural integrity of these forests are not replicated anywhere else. The time frame isn't right. It takes 300 plus years to go to get that structural integrity. And I think that as you're walking around, just take a look at what we call architecture. It's on the ground, it's up in the tops of the trees. You just don't find that in these other areas. And hence you'd think that, hey, I'm going to be a smart species. That's the type of structure I'm going to need because no one else is there. And that's exactly what happens. You find all this unique stuff, right from plants to insects to higher vertebrates.